A bolt of lightning tears across the sky. And within minutes, an entire forest becomes a sea of fire. The air you breathe is not just hot, it is so energy-rich that it becomes dangerous. This is not a rare catastrophe. It is the normal state of prehistoric Earth, if it had never changed. During the Carboniferous period, around 359 to 299 million years ago, atmospheric oxygen levels were not 21% as they are today, but ranged from approximately 30% to 35%. All it took was a small spark, from lightning, friction, or even ambient heat, to trigger a massive wildfire. But high oxygen levels also had a direct impact on life itself. With more oxygen available, metabolic processes became more efficient, allowing organisms to grow to much larger sizes. This is precisely why insects of this era could reach enormous proportions, and also why the ecosystem became more dangerous in the most literal sense. Another astonishing consequence lies beneath our feet today: coal. Most modern coal deposits were formed from ancient forests that burned, then were buried under layers of sediment over millions of years. If this state had never changed, in such a constantly unstable environment, could life evolve toward greater complexity? Or did these extreme conditions pave the way for a different kind of organism, larger, faster, and more dangerous? And that is when the true rulers of the ancient world, giant insects, emerged. A shadow sweeps over your head, so fast you barely have time to react. It is a creature resembling a dragonfly, but its wingspan stretches nearly as wide as a human arm. The space around you belongs to those that fly, crawl, and hunt in silence. This is Carboniferous Earth, where insects did not merely exist, they ruled. One of the clearest pieces of evidence is Meganeura, a giant dragonfly with a wingspan reaching approximately 65 to 70 centimeters. Confirmed through fossils discovered in Europe. At this size, Meganeura was not a harmless insect. It was a true predator, capable of capturing and killing other insects, even small animals. Even more terrifying, beneath the ground and within shallow waters lived J. a sea scorpion that could grow up to 2.5 meters in length. With its large pincers, developed vision, and rapid movement in water, it is considered one of the largest predatory arthropods to have ever existed on Earth. It was the atmosphere itself that unlocked their immense potential. If these conditions had never changed, insects would never have been reduced to their modern sizes. They could have continued evolving into dominant predators, faster, larger, and perfectly adapted to an oxygen-rich environment. And as you try to escape them, you step deeper into something even more terrifying. An ancient forest so dense that light cannot penetrate, where every path seems to vanish completely. Not because of darkness, but because the canopy above is so thick that sunlight cannot break through. The air is humid, heavy, and hot, the scent of decaying vegetation mixing with layers of rising mud. Every step sinks into a soft surface, as if walking on a living cushion. Yet in reality, it is millions of years of organic matter that has never disappeared. This is the primeval forest of ancient Earth, an ecosystem unlike any forest that exists today. Most of the land is covered by vast forests, but they are not modern trees. The dominant plant life consists of species such as lycophytes and ancient ferns, reaching heights of 20 to 30 meters, equivalent to a 7 to 10-story building. Their trunks are straight, with minimal branching, growing so densely that there is almost no space between them. But what makes this forest truly terrifying lies in what is happening beneath your feet. During this period, organisms capable of efficiently decomposing lignin had not yet fully evolved. After plants died, they accumulated layer upon layer. Over thousands, even millions of years, the ground became a dense mass of partially decomposed organic material. This is the very origin of the vast coal deposits that humans extract today. Every step is a risk. You do not know what lies beneath that soft surface. Water, mud, or a deep cavity formed from decaying plant matter. No light reaches the forest floor. Photosynthesis is limited to the upper canopy, leaving the ecosystem below impoverished and unstable. The space becomes suffocating, with almost no air circulation. If these conditions had never changed, the forest would continue to grow in thickness, becoming denser, darker, and more dangerous. Light would never reach the ground, and the entire ecosystem would fall into a state of stagnation, a system unable to expand, unable to evolve further. So in a world where the land is locked beneath forests with no escape, could life find another path, a place more vast, more stable, and far deeper? Because while the land becomes suffocating and trapped, beneath those dark waters, another world is still in motion, a place where life may have never left. All around you, millions of organisms are in motion. Strange forms, bodies unlike anything seen in the modern world. And all of them seem to have been here for a very long time, long before life ever set foot on land. This is not just an ocean, it is the cradle of life. More than 3.5 billion years ago, the first life forms emerged in aquatic environments. And for hundreds of millions of years afterward, the ocean remained the most stable ecosystem on the planet. Water acted as a buffer, keeping conditions relatively stable across geological time. In that world, organisms like trilobites dominated the ocean floor for over 270 million years, a span longer than the entire existence of dinosaurs. They possessed segmented bodies, highly developed compound eyes, and the ability to adapt to a wide range of marine environments, from shallow waters to the deep sea. Alongside them were ammonites, creatures with distinctive coiled shells, drifting through the water column like perfectly engineered biological machines. They evolved rapidly, diversified extensively, and became one of the most successful groups of marine life in evolutionary history. But perhaps most remarkable were the earliest vertebrates, primitive jawless fish such as agnatha, with simple body structures, no teeth, and no efficient ability to hunt. Yet in a stable environment like the ocean, they did not need to change much in order to survive. Evolution does not occur simply because time passes. It happens under pressure. When environments force organisms to adapt, change, or face extinction. But if the ocean remains stable, if food is abundant, if no significant threats arise, then the driving force for evolution nearly disappears. The movement of life from the ocean onto land. One of the most critical turning points in biological history was the result of multiple forces: climate shifts, biological competition, and survival pressures. But in a world that never changes, those pressures may never emerge. Life could remain trapped beneath the water. Land, though it exists, would never become the center of complex life. No biodiverse forests, no mammals, no humans. Only the ocean, deep, vast, and filled with ancient organisms repeating themselves over millions of years. But if life does not change, the entire planet would fall into an even more dangerous state. A state where everything continues to exist, yet nothing truly develops. That is when we enter a concept more terrifying than extinction itself. A world where evolution is frozen, where life does not die, but never moves forward. At first glance, it may seem ideal. No asteroids striking the planet, no mass extinction events, no collapse of ecosystems. But this very state of perfect stability becomes an evolutionary trap. In Earth's history, evolution has never proceeded in a steady, continuous line. It unfolds in bursts, often triggered by major disruptions. One of the clearest examples is the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event around 66 million years ago. When an asteroid impact wiped out approximately 75% of all species, including non-avian dinosaurs, it was not only an ending, it was also a beginning. Small mammals, once overshadowed, suddenly gained the opportunity to expand and diversify. Further back, the Permian-Triassic extinction event around 252 million years ago eliminated up to 90 to 96% of marine species and about 70% of terrestrial life. It was the largest extinction event in Earth's history, yet this near-total reset created the conditions for entirely new ecosystems to emerge. Events like these function as a kind of reset button. They dismantle existing structures, free up ecological space, and impose pressures that force life to adapt in entirely new directions. But in a world that never changes, that reset button is never pressed. This presents a scientific paradox. Life does not require perfect stability to advance. It requires change. It is disruption, crisis, and near-extinction events that drive evolution forward. If prehistoric Earth had never changed, evolution might have remained frozen for hundreds of millions of years. A planet full of life, but without true progress, no higher intelligence, no awareness. And that leads to a deeper question. Without those evolutionary leaps, would humans with the ability to think, to question, and to understand the universe ever have existed? Or would this entire planet remain silent, not because life is absent, but because nothing has evolved far enough to realize that it exists? This planet still turns, forests still breathe, and the oceans continue in constant motion. Giant creatures still hunt, survive, and vanish within the cycles of their existence. A world full of life, yet completely silent. You stand on a planet with no humans, no language to describe the sky, no science to explain the storms, no history, no technology, no trace of self-aware intelligence. From a scientific perspective, humans are not an inevitable outcome. We are the product of an extraordinarily complex evolutionary chain spanning more than 3.5 billion years. From the first single-celled microorganisms to multicellular life, then to vertebrates, mammals, and ultimately primates. Every step in that chain depended on continuous environmental change, climate, geology, and even global catastrophes. One of the most critical turning points was the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event around 66 million years ago. When an asteroid struck Earth, it wiped out most dinosaur species, creatures that had dominated the planet for over 160 million years. Yet their disappearance opened the door for mammals, small organisms that had once lived in the shadows, to rapidly expand and diversify. From there, over tens of millions of years, primates emerged, brains grew, and the abilities to remember, learn, and communicate became increasingly complex. And finally, around 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens appeared, a species capable not only of surviving, but of understanding, questioning, and reshaping its own environment. If prehistoric Earth had never changed, no extinctions, no climate shifts, no evolutionary pressures, then the chain of events leading to humans would never have begun. The earliest dominant species would have continued to hold their positions. Mammals might never have evolved beyond small body sizes, and the brain would have had no reason to become more complex. A planet may be full of life, but without awareness, it remains a system operating in silence, without meaning, without memory, without a future shaped by thought. From a scientific perspective, life does not advance along a quiet, linear path. It is a chain of reactions to violent disruptions. Without those moments of chaos, ecosystems would become closed systems, eliminating any possibility for the emergence of intelligence and awareness. A prehistoric Earth that never changed might still function, still sustain life. But it would never produce a being capable of self-awareness, of recognizing its own existence. If prehistoric Earth had never changed, it would remain forever a wild and dangerous world, one with no humans to tell its story. According to geochemical studies based on fossilized coal and ancient wildfire indicators, excess oxygen did more than sustain life, it transformed life itself. In that context, the ground was no longer the domain of small creatures. It became a refuge for massive bodies that today we can only imagine as monsters. Arthropleura stands as the clearest symbol of this upheaval. It was a terrestrial arthropod, a distant relative of modern millipedes, commonly measuring 2 to 3 meters in length. With some fossil evidence suggesting individuals may have reached nearly 6 meters, close to 20 feet. To this day, Arthropleura is considered the largest land-dwelling arthropod ever to exist. What is remarkable is not only its size, but the fact that such size was not paired with sophisticated biological weapons. There was no lethal venom, no specialized biting jaws. Arthropleura existed because the environment allowed it to exist at that scale. Arthropods breathe through a tracheal system, in which oxygen diffuses directly from the air into tissues, without relying on a circulatory system like that of vertebrates. Under low or moderate oxygen conditions, this mechanism imposes strict limits on body size. When oxygen flooded the atmosphere, diffusion efficiency increased dramatically, weakening the physiological barrier that had long restrained bodily expansion. Size was no longer a survival challenge, it became an almost natural consequence. Arthropleura was not alone. Homo scorpius, an ancient scorpion species, reflects the same trend. Fossils indicate it could reach lengths of around 71 centimeters. Possessed 4 eyes and lived within humid, swampy forest ecosystems. A scorpion the size of a small child is not a product of imagination, but the result of selective pressure within a distorted environment. When resources are abundant and competition is scarce. Evolution is not forced to optimize, it merely expands. In such a world, large size became a passive advantage. Difficult to attack, capable of accessing abundant plant resources, and able to dominate ecological space without significant competition. High oxygen concentrations also greatly increase the risk of wildfires, as even a minor ignition source could trigger vast infernos. Stratigraphic studies reveal that Carboniferous wildfire traces appear with unusually high frequency, confirmed through fossilized charcoal. In this context, the hard armor and massive bodies that once gave Arthropleura an advantage became fatal weaknesses. They could not run fast, could not burrow deep, and had no survival strategy against large-scale fires. The giant creatures of the land did not collapse because they were weak, but because they were born into a world already out of balance. Arthropleura and Pulmonoscorpius existed, but they could not endure. The Carboniferous period clearly shows that when a planet allows size to exceed familiar limits, life must also bear the consequences. The land, during that time, was no longer a place for small, agile, or finely adapted organisms. It belongs to slow, massive bodies supported by an oxygen-rich atmosphere and an energy-surplus ecosystem. And that imbalance was not confined to the ground alone. It was quietly reshaping another realm, the sky. Where new predators would spread their wings and claim an ecosystem that was nearly empty. And it is there that the Carboniferous nightmare rises to an entirely different level. Paleontologists refer to this era as the Golden Age of Sharks, because sharks dominated nearly every upper level of the underwater food chain. What set Carboniferous sharks apart was this: when food was abundant and stable, they did not focus on catching prey faster, but instead shifted toward exploiting prey more efficiently. This opened an entirely different evolutionary space where body shape, jaw structure, feeding mechanics, and survival strategies became the central focus. The fossil record shows that Carboniferous sharks occupied multiple ecological niches at the same time. Some hunted in shallow coastal waters, others adapted to brackish swamp environments, and some ranged far into the open ocean. the underwater food web became clearly stratified. Bottom-dwelling organisms, bony fish and small cartilaginous fish. Mid-sized sharks and apex sharks at the top. Each tier was locked in by specialized survival strategies. When one link weakened, another immediately filled the gap. Yet this very dominance made Carboniferous marine ecosystems fragile in a different way. When a food chain becomes too dense and too layered, ecological flexibility declines. Species grow increasingly specialized, heavily dependent on specific food sources and narrowly defined environmental conditions. And the most unsettling part is this: sharks did not stop at familiar designs. In an energy-rich environment, evolution no longer optimized for good enough, but began experimenting with strange, even risky solutions. Unusual jaw structures, counterintuitive body shapes, and hunting strategies unlike anything that exists today began to appear. At this point, water was no longer just a place to survive. It became an uncontrolled evolutionary laboratory. Ambush predators in the darkness, where silence could kill faster than teeth or claws. Stethecanthus was an ancient shark species with an average length of about 0.9 meters, 3 feet. And an estimated mass of roughly 9 kilograms, 20 pounds. What made it stand out in the Carboniferous shark world was its highly unusual dorsal structure. A large dorsal spine combined with a thick pad of tissue, rough textured and standing upright like an overturned ironing board. There is no evidence that this structure helped it swim faster, hunt more effectively, or defend itself better against predators. Morphological and comparative anatomical studies suggest that this spine brush complex may have been linked to display behavior. Possibly serving purposes related to reproduction, deterring rivals of the same species, or communication in murky, low-light waters. This makes Stethecanthus an evolutionary anomaly that is deeply unsettling from a theoretical perspective. Stethecanthus is a vivid reminder that evolution does not always produce the most optimal organisms, but rather those capable of surviving under specific conditions. If Stethecanthus represents morphological strangeness, other Carboniferous sharks reveal boldness in biological mechanisms, especially in jaw structure. A notable example is Estes, an ancient marine predator known from fossils indicating extraordinary size. With an estimated length exceeding 6.7 meters, 22 feet. It was one of the largest predators ever to inhabit Carboniferous oceans. What made Estes remarkable was not just its size, but how its jaws functioned. Fossils show an upper jaw approximately 30.2 centimeters long, while the lower jaw reached about 43 centimeters, creating a pronounced asymmetry. The jaw joints indicate movement that was not a simple open and close motion along a single axis, but instead operated like a pair of shears with multiple phases of motion. A mechanism often described as a two-gear system. This allowed prey to be processed with extreme efficiency once restrained. Slicing, tearing, and separating tissue with remarkable force and precision. What Stethecanthus, Estes, and many other unusual Carboniferous sharks share is morphological freedom. Sharks of this era were not confined to a single standard design like modern sharks. They displayed dorsal spines, unconventional body proportions, asymmetric jaw structures, and non-repeating survival strategies. However, when evolution invests too heavily in specialized designs, ecological flexibility begins to erode. A creature optimized for processing prey in an energy-rich environment faces severe difficulty when food supplies decline or when ecosystem structures shift. Bizarre forms are often tightly bound to specific conditions. They perform well in a stable world, but become fragile in the face of change. Within dense swamp forests, where light is swallowed by thick canopies and heavy moisture hangs in the air, an entirely different form of predation emerged. This was a world of hunters that did not need to chase, did not rely on speed or sustained strength. But survived by waiting for a prey's mistake in the darkness. In such an environment, running fast for long periods was nearly impossible. Every step consumed energy and carried the risk of becoming trapped. Fossil evidence shows that many species from this period possessed bodies exceeding 30 centimeters in length. With low, compact builds and wide frames, some reaching sizes comparable to a human head. These were not bodies optimized for endurance running, but for releasing explosive force in brief moments. Analyses of limb bone structure reveal large muscle attachment sites and robust joints, allowing for sudden bursts of acceleration. Biological models based on anatomy suggest these creatures could reach short-term speeds of around 15 to 16 kilometers per hour. Not to pursue prey, but to end the hunt within the first few seconds. Carboniferous predators dug burrows or exploited tree root cavities. Mud crevices and rotting stumps as hiding places. Prey was not subjected to constant pursuit, but instead lived under persistent unseen tension, moving more slowly, behaving more cautiously, and even reproducing differently. Burrows and hiding cavities within Carboniferous swamp forests were extremely vulnerable to flooding. The hot, humid climate made heavy rainfall frequent. Flat terrain caused water levels to rise quickly but drain slowly. A sudden flood could submerge entire burrow systems within hours, turning shelters into death traps. This reveals that the most successful ambushers were also the ones facing the greatest sudden risk. There was no time to flee, no escape route. When water rose, burrows collapsed, or mud poured in. Death arrived swiftly and without discrimination. Slower individuals, those that dug too shallow or those that chose the wrong location, vanished without leaving descendants. The Carboniferous was not a world of long-term strategies. Evolution here was immediate effectiveness combined with chance. It was a world ruled by decisive moments. In confined spaces, with unstable food supplies and ecological isolation, the rivers, lakes, and freshwater swamps of the Carboniferous period became the harshest crucible of natural selection. The Canthus emerged, an ancient shark species with an average length of about 3 meters, 10 feet. Living roughly between 315 and 275 million years ago. And most importantly, it inhabited primarily freshwater environments, inland river systems, enclosed lakes, and dense swamps, where water flowed slowly, remained murky, and shifted dramatically with the seasons. Fossils of Orthocanthus have been found across multiple continents, indicating a near-global distribution during the late Carboniferous. Its body was long and slender, almost eel-like, well suited for slipping through narrow channels and flooded root systems. On its head rose a sharp dorsal spine, believed to have been venomous. allowing it to defend itself or subdue prey within confined spaces. Fossilized feces attributed to orthocanthus have been discovered containing bones and teeth of juvenile orthocanthus themselves. This is not speculation based on ecological modeling. It is undeniable physical evidence. Adult orthocanthus consumed their own offspring. Not as rare anomalies, but as part of a survival strategy. Food availability depended on rainfall, flood cycles, plant decay, and benthic organisms, all of which were extremely sensitive to environmental change. A prolonged drought, a flood that wiped out bottom-dwelling life, or the accumulation of oxygen-poor sediment was enough to collapse the entire food chain. Under such conditions, juveniles became the most reliable source of energy. When the environment could no longer support an entire generation, eliminating part of the next generation allowed adults to survive and preserve their future reproductive potential. Evolution cares only about the probability of survival. This reveals a fundamental difference between freshwater systems and the oceans during the Carboniferous. In the oceans, energy surplus allowed for complex and indirect strategies. But in freshwater, every strategy had to be direct and immediate. Orthocanthus was not the fastest predator, nor the largest. But it was among the most perfectly adapted to harsh conditions. Its elongated body conserved energy while moving slowly through stagnant water. Its venomous spine allowed prey control without pursuit. And cannibalistic behavior ensured that energy did not leak out of the system. Notably, Carboniferous freshwater environments did not only produce cannibalism, they also shaped hunting strategies fundamentally different from those of the open ocean. Murky water, poor visibility, and complex terrain filled with roots, decaying logs, and thick mud made long-distance pursuit nearly impossible. From these dark waters, evolution began favoring creatures capable of ambush, concealment, and delivering decisive strikes within fleeting moments. From enclosed freshwater systems, the Carboniferous story now slides into an even more terrifying chapter. Ambushers in the darkness, where silence kills faster than teeth and claws. When we look at the Carboniferous as a whole, the truly terrifying thing is the environment that produced all of this. The Carboniferous was not merely a unique biological period. It was a rare moment in Earth's history when the entire planet functioned like a colossal swamp machine, constantly fueling life beyond normal limits, while quietly accumulating the conditions for its own collapse. Between roughly 358.9 and 298.9 million years ago, most of the continents were clustered near the equator. This distribution subjected Earth to a prolonged hot and humid climate, with high and relatively stable rainfall lasting tens of millions of years. These were not short-lived climate cycles, but a long-standing baseline state, one that endured long enough to reshape the planet's entire surface. These forests were dominated by ancient vascular plants such as giant lycopsids, horsetails, and tree ferns, ranging from several meters to over 30 meters in height. Their life cycles were fast, their biomass immense, and most critically, much of their plant matter fell into waterlogged, oxygen-poor environments. Under such conditions, decomposition slowed dramatically. Carbon was buried and accumulated as thick layers of peat, altering the balance of the atmosphere. As carbon dioxide was removed from the short-term cycle, oxygen began to build up. High oxygen levels intensified metabolic processes, relaxed the physiological limits of many groups of organisms, and removed the constraints that once restricted body size. Extinction did not occur as a single catastrophic event, but as a series of cascading breaks across ecosystems that had already been under strain. The Carboniferous, therefore, was not a golden age in any sustainable sense. It was a partially failed planetary experiment. Earth demonstrated that life can explode spectacularly when barriers are removed. But it also showed that every extreme system carries the seeds of its own destruction. Life did not collapse from a lack of energy, but from too much energy contained within an unstable structure. As the Carboniferous slowly drew to a close, the most haunting legacy was the presence of organisms that could not be neatly placed into any evolutionary drawer. The Tulimonstrum, gregarium, stands as the clearest symbol of the ambiguity, uncertainty, and instability that defined the entire period. First discovered in the state of Illinois, USA, within sediment layers dated to around 307 million years ago during the late Carboniferous. It was not large. Its average length was only about 35 centimeters. But it ignited more than half a century of scientific debate. His body was soft and elongated, lacking a hard shell and lacking obvious bones. Resembling a squid more than a fish. Its eyes sat on long stalks extending sideways, allowing it to observe both directions at once. At the front was a long proboscis ending in a jaw armed with 16 teeth, resembling a biological pincer more than the mouth of any familiar animal. It does not fit cleanly among invertebrates. Yet it also fails to align with any known group of vertebrates. However, some specimens show traces of characteristic proteins associated with cartilage. Suggesting that the Tully monster may belong to a primitive vertebrate lineage. In addition, structures interpreted as gills, along with signs of a rudimentary spinal cord, further support this hypothesis. There is no clear evidence of a lateral line, the water vibration sensing system, that is almost mandatory in fish. No structures corresponding to balance organs such as an inner ear have been identified. Its body plan also fails to match any known evolutionary branches of fish. The result is that the Tully monster stands at the edge of every classification system, belonging fully to none. The existence of such a creature is a direct product of an uncontrolled evolutionary environment. It demonstrates that evolution does not always produce clear, continuous, or logical lineages. The Carboniferous ended, but its lesson remains. When a planet pushes its systems beyond the threshold of balance, life does not choose safety or morality. It exploits, expands, and experiments until the very foundation of existence can no longer support it. And so, when we look back at the Carboniferous, the question is not what survived, but what was lost when Earth transformed itself into a world unfit for stable life. Earth was once a true nightmare, and the Carboniferous stands as a reminder that such nightmares require no intelligence, only the right conditions to emerge.
Observe the exquisite energy efficiency of the iridescent jewel beetle, a marvel of the insect world as it navigates this vibrant petal.
Thank you for staying with WUFO Space until the very end of this journey through the vast universe. If you found this video interesting and insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to WUFO Space so you won't miss our next cosmic adventures. Your support means the world to us and fuels our passion to keep exploring the wonders beyond.